Hi, I'm Harry Rock, and welcome to another edition of the Westfield Council on Aging Presents. This is a special collaborative effort with Mike Squindo, Executive Director of the Westfield Senior Center, Tina Gorman, COA Special Projects Coordinator, and Pete Coles, producer of WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15. Our topic today, and it is an interesting one, is true love scams with older adults. And my guest is Hampden County District Attorney Anthony Gulluni. Those of you who have been watching over the years will remember that he was on our show 2 years ago with a program discussing financial scams with seniors. Today we're going to be discussing the unfortunate increase in the number of older adults falling prey to dating and marriage scams. These have resulted in bank and investment accounts being transitioned from individual accounts to shared accounts, giving scammers immediate access to people's money. So I want to welcome you to the show, Anthony. I really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us really the unfortunate side of society that has chosen to take advantage of people that are looking for true love and for companionship as they get older as they get lonelier in their older years.
Right.
And that happens because they've lost spouses or friends have passed away, family members have passed away, and it's just an unfortunate thing to see taking place. And not only are these individuals losing money, but they're also losing their trust in ever looking for human companionship, because now they're feeling vulnerable and quite frankly able to be taken advantage of. So as we think about this, how prevalent a problem is this? And and we can reference what's happening nationally as well as what's happening just in our area, as with the statistics that you have and what you're experiencing. But just how prevalent a problem is this?
Sure. First, it's a pleasure to be back with you, Harry, and all your viewership. We had a conversation, as you referenced, a couple of years ago about other financial scams that affect largely older adults. And it is indeed unfortunate that this is the new iteration for scammers and criminals to take advantage of older adults and people of all ages. And in fact, it is prevalent. In 2022, through self-reporting, really, so you can imagine that the number is low. Here in Massachusetts, there was about $8 million taken just by romance or love scams, right? That doesn't include all other kinds of scams that we've talked about in the past. And about $240 million in that same year was taken from older adults per romance scams nationally. So this is indeed prevalent. It's a significant problem. It's one that's growing. And as we've talked about, and we know in the criminal world, and certainly in the space of scammers, there's always the next thing, right? Folks become aware of certain types of scams, and they defend themselves against them. And then there's an evolution by criminals and by scammers. And this is that next piece, and we want to inform your viewership and the public at large about this issue.
Can you run those numbers again? It was
Sure.
$8 million.
Yeah, in 2022, and here just in Massachusetts, it was about $8 million. And again, that was through self-reporting. So we can imagine really the great probability is that's a very low number. It's probably much more than that. Folks who have not told authorities, folks who have not told anybody, or weren't just captured in how this money
Yeah, I'm
was.
sure they're embarrassed or can't
Of course,
believe
and that's something
got
we'll
taken.
talk about, I think, Harry, in terms of how family members can deal
Right.
with, their parents or grandparents around these kinds of issues, because it's embarrassing, it's humiliating,
Right.
not only to be taken advantage of, right, through some sort of financial scam, but particularly in this instance where you talk about someone falling for someone online, and that's a product of loneliness and so on and so forth. So it really exposes a lot for that older adult. So we'll talk about the ways in which
Sure.
to prevent that and to talk with your older friends or family members. But yeah, I think it's also it's an influence in underreporting on this issue.
Men and women, is one sex type more prevalent to being scammed, or is it?
No, it's
universal.
It's an equal opportunity crime.
Okay.
In the reporting that we're seeing and some of the statistics we're privy to, it's really pretty equal. Older adults, male and female, are falling prey to this to this scam.
Okay.
And, I think, as you referenced in your opening, you have men and women who are at stages in their lives where they're experiencing loneliness, whether it's distance from family, it's the loss of a spouse,
Right.
it's the product of aging. So we found it's pretty equal, certainly an issue for both genders.
Wow. And who are the scammers? Who are these people?
Yeah, it's hard to really categorize specifically. It can be anybody. But by and large, in some of the prosecutions that we've seen nationally, you have organized criminal gangs who, engage in this type of crime. They're sophisticated. They know how to ply their victims. They have certain sort of talking points. They use certain technologies around how to be successful with these crimes, with scamming older adults out of financial resources. Some of the recent prosecutions that we've seen actually have been out of the Boston U.S. Attorney's Office, so the federal government, and they've prosecuted 3 nationals from Africa, actually, successfully, who have engaged in these kinds of frauds and have ended up with tens of thousands of dollars and were successfully prosecuted through immense resources, right, of the federal government and agreements with foreign countries to extradite these folks. But we've seen, I think, all manner of criminals, but there is a certain percentage that is a sophisticated criminal organization that engages in this kind of scam and knows how to do it successfully, and it becomes, unfortunately, very lucrative for them.
How are the victims being targeted? How are these scammers finding their victims? What resources or what techniques do they have to identify that Harry Rock might be a good source to go after or target to go after?
Yeah, by and large, the platform is the internet, right? Is social media, is dating sites. So you have older adults who are creating profiles on Match.com or Plenty of Fish or any of these, very mainstream, safe dating platforms, as well as things like, sure, right, as well as things like Facebook and Instagram and so forth, that all folks are using, by and large, in a safe way, in a normal way. But they're looking to identify, in general, older adults who may be posting things about the loss of a spouse, who may be, out there seeking some romantic relationship or connection with people, right? Again, a lot of this is happening on dating websites, so the very nature of that, right, if someone is participatory on a dating website, they're looking for a connection. They're looking to meet someone. They're looking to have a relationship, and instead of someone on the other end who's in the same position earnestly to find a relationship, you have people who are not who they say they are. They create fake profiles, and they're scammers. And that we'll talk about that process and how it works in particular, but really all the information we put on social media, especially as an older adult, with respect to private information, family information, deceased loved ones, certain comments about our state of mind or whatever it may be, is all being filtered through by these scammers, and they're looking to identify vulnerable people. And, that is, I think, that brings 2 important messages. One is these are dastardly people, right? These are bad people who are not only looking to take what's not theirs from innocent people, but they're really targeting vulnerable people, people who they can work, they can deceive, they can fool. And that's just a terrible thing, obviously, from a moral standpoint.
Right.
The second thing is, if you're in one of these positions, you have to protect yourself, right? You have to be aware that these kinds of folks are out there. I don't think anyone should admit that they're vulnerable, but if they are out there on a dating website, they're an older adult, you've got to be very circumspect. You've got to be very careful.
And my wife will be happy to hear this. I've never gone onto a dating site.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah,
So I have no idea, but so when they create these profiles, how personal does it get? Or does it offer phone numbers and email addresses? And is it so that they've got a lot of personal information sitting right there?
Yeah, on both sides. I mean, these dating websites don't necessarily offer personal information to viewers, but you're putting a lot about your biographical background and interests and love life and history and so forth. That's a part of it. So some of that can be utilized or leveraged. And the bad people are creating very legitimate profiles, right, on dating websites and on Facebook and other social media platforms that are very convincing. And as we look at what folks can be aware of to protect themselves and how in these situations, because, right, a lot of great relationships start with an online connection, right? They start with a dating website. This has become very commonplace in the last 10 or 15 years. In fact, my best friend met his now wife and mother of his child
really?
through a dating website years ago.
Interesting.
So, this is how, modern folks
Right.
date and meet people and start relationships. So there's nothing wrong with that, but we
Right.
have to be very careful in how we interact from that point forward. And again, these scammers are expert at this in creating very legitimate profiles and have ways to convince the person on the other end from whom they want to take money and personal information, how to convince them. So the profiles will appear very legitimate. There'll be pictures, there'll be personal information. And, as we talk about ways in which our senior citizens can protect themselves, there are some red flags to look out for, and there are some questions and sort of procedures that one can put forward to try to protect themselves and maybe filter out people who have bad intentions.
Right. And the one thing that I would definitely say to our viewers is make sure that you clean up your social media profiles. I use Facebook, and a lot of my family members do. That's how we stay in touch with friends and with family updates and what's happening in our world. But make sure that you don't have phone numbers or emails or other personal information that you really want to keep private posted on these sites, because I'm guessing that that's an automatic place for them to go and look.
Sure, that's a general principle, right? I mean,
Right.
any personal information you don't want out there,
Right.
it's going to be taken advantage of, and that's just a personal safety thing. You don't want that information out
Right.
there for people you don't know.
Are there certain profiles of people that they're looking to get to that they feel are more vulnerable? Are there certain things that they're thinking about or researching, saying, well, Harry Rock, he's probably not I don't know that we'd get very far with him, but Bill Smith, boy, I look at his profile, that's a really good target. Are there certain things that they're looking at, or are they just kind of scamming across the board?
No, we think there are targets, and by and large, I mean, the most general category are older folks, right, senior
Okay.
citizens. And, with that, and listen, my parents are well into their 80s and pretty sharp. So it's not a blanket statement, and it's certainly nothing derogatory towards our senior population. But by and large, in general, the reason for this is senior citizens sometimes aren't fully conversant with technology and social media, right, would be more vulnerable to making
that's
mistakes.
a great point, right?
We do have, of course, our senior population that is in a cognitive decline process.
Yeah.
And senior adults are more likely to be lonely. They're more likely to have lost a spouse and be widowers or widows. They're more likely to be away from other family members, to have a smaller social group in which to operate. So yeah, they're targeting these older adults, and there's certain things in particular in profiles, especially on dating websites and things like Facebook, where you announce the death of a spouse, or you announce funeral arrangements, or you identify yourself as a widow or widower. And those are the things that they're looking for, again, because they're looking
that's a
to
great
prey.
point,
Yeah, they're
right.
looking to prey on people who are mourning, who are lonely, who are without
Right.
that partner. And, again, that's the evil involved in this, but it's true. And the more folks are aware of it, I think the better off we can protect them and they can protect themselves.
My mother, she was 92 when she passed away a few years ago, and she always used to say to me, "Oh, Harry, I've lost all my, I'm the only one left of the family," because she was. All of her parents, brothers, sisters, cousins, nephews, they were all gone. She was it. She was the top of the heap at that point. And fortunately, she was not technologically oriented, because that was well before her generation. But she was lonely. And so she was always best friends with the mailman or the paperman or delivery guy. She's inviting them into that. I'm saying, "Ma, you can't be doing that." But it's all about loneliness in her case. But she always said, "All my friends are gone, all my family's gone, and I'm just so lonely. I just like to talk to people when they come to the door," kind of thing. And
It's a great example.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Yeah.
So, I think one of the questions I was thinking about was how do scammers get in touch with their targeted individuals? But obviously, going through these sites, those sites allow for that connection. And again, I don't know how those things work, but I'm guessing if they find a connection, they have immediate access to an individual. There's no firewall or anything that's checking them out or anything. These dating sites are just basically, you pay me, I'll list your profile, and whatever happens between you and that person.
To a degree. I mean, many of these dating sites and certainly social media platforms like Facebook have some built-in algorithms to prevent scammers. If they can identify that someone is engaged in this kind of activity, they're going to filter them out and block them. But we can't operate on that presumption, right? I mean, folks need to believe and operate with care and caution and protect themselves because these folks are being successful. I mean, one platform that I thought was interesting that we found was being used for this sort of victimization was Words with Friends. It's a very common sort of gaming platform where you trade, different word puzzles and go back and forth. So, we see it with kids where, some of the games they play, the video games, there's a social aspect to them where you can communicate with other people. And sometimes that's being used by bad people to make contact with kids. Same thing here. Some of these apps and games and so forth have connectivity between gamers or users. So Words with Friends is a great example where you have to kind of keep your guard up at all times. Certainly the dating websites where you're exposing yourself and the very objective is to connect with other people. Social media, the same thing. It's all about social connections. But some of these other games too can be susceptible for people to misuse them. So we have to kind of be aware when we're dealing with anybody in a way that's anonymous or in a way that's not in person, right?
Right. So when we really get down to it, these scammers aren't interested in creating relationships for friendship. They are looking to steal your money. So I was thinking about that. How do they go about building that level of trust with these individuals that allows these or convinces these people to want to give them their account numbers or to shared access to their accounts, and then those accounts get wiped out?
Sure.
How does that trust level, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, it's very similar to other scams that we've talked about. In this case, it really preys on the emotions of the potential victim, right? They're identifying who they think is most vulnerable. That initiation comes with contact, right, either through that dating website or social media platform. And they present themselves as an attractive and successful suitor, someone who's trustworthy in particular, and they come across as the person you're looking to meet, right? If you engage in a dating platform to meet someone or you're on social media, they're going to present themselves as a normal person who is going to be attractive, whether you're looking for a male or a female. And again, there'll be certain things that they put out there to connect, to make that initial engagement. And then really we call it grooming. Over weeks and months, scammer will build a seemingly genuine relationship with the victim, which gains their trust and their attention, right? Just like any other courting situation, they're going to work hard to engage with that person on a consistent basis, to build trust, to build some affection or build some emotion between the two. And then over the course of time, they're going to make a request for money. And they're going to create a sense of urgency around that. They're going to ask for money to cover something like an emergency, a medical bill, a travel expense, a tragedy of a child or grandchild for which they need money. So that will come once that trust is established. And this is the game that they play, and this is what they've become expert at doing, and this is why it's effective. That escalation will continue. And if the victim complies or doesn't comply, the scammer will get more and more forceful, right? Especially if the victim complies, there will be escalation. There'll be requests for more money. There'll be more fabricated emergencies or medical issues that will result in sometimes tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars being sent to these folks who are not who they say they are. And that process is tried and true. So it may seem a little ridiculous or hard to believe if you're listening to this program, right? And say, well, gee, I'm never going to send someone $20,000 who I've never met. It happens a lot, and it happens to people who are of sound mind and intelligent. But it becomes almost like this quicksand that happens very, very quickly, and all of a sudden you're engaged in this relationship.
Wow. Yeah, that's scary. So scammers are looking for, let's talk about what kinds of things that they're looking for from the standpoint of financial resources. So passwords, PIN numbers.
Anything from which they can gain money and things of value. In 2022, 60% of payments made to romance scammers were via cryptocurrency or bank wires, right? So you might not be engaged in cryptocurrency, but a lot of folks are, they convince the person that, hey, I need this money right away, send it to me through a bank wire. Other payment methods we've seen are gift cards, payment apps, and so forth. But they'll also seek to scam you or deceive you into giving personal information with which they can go and steal your possessions or your money. PIN numbers and social security numbers and other personal information. So, really the process is going to be consistent, right? There's going to be initiation and initial engagement. They're going to present themselves as someone attractive. They're going to build trust. There's going to be a process of days, weeks, or months where that trust is really kind of cemented and fortified through constant communication and conversation. And then there's going to be an emergency. There's going to be some request for money where they're going to pull on your heartstrings, where you've built this relationship. You think this person is maybe someone you're going to spend time with. You're going to find that romance or that love, and they're going to say, "Oh my gosh, I just broke my leg and I can't pay my mortgage," or, my son just got into a car crash and he's going to go to jail. And these are familiar themes, I think, to folks, because we've talked about this. And this is these deceptions that happen in other types of scams. But really what's become so effective and perilous about this scam, this romance scam, is, they engage with you. They get you to believe that they're on the other end as this earnest love interest, and they build trust. And then they pull this rug out from under you and try to get your money. And that should raise red flags in and of itself.
Perfect lead in. Red flags.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of words that you keep throwing out that I think people have to think about, and it's hard to deal with because it's about trust. As people, as good human beings, we trust. That's part of our nature. So we don't think about, well, I'm reaching out, I'm looking for some companionship, but boy, I'm going to be really testing you, or I'm really suspect of what your intentions are. We trust. So what are the red flags, if any, that people can be aware of to think that, maybe this isn't quite what it's supposed to be, or where it's not where it should be going?
Sure. I think it's probably a pretty natural process for anyone who's gotten into a relationship, right? You kind of keep people at arm's distance for a little while, and when you're courting or dating someone in person, you don't give them everything right away. There's a process, and you get to know that person. I think here it's somewhat similar, and I think it's you have to be mindful now of these scams and that these folks are out here in particular, right? So typically the claims of the suitor, of the scammer ultimately, is they live or work or are traveling abroad, right? Because what they want to do is put themselves in a position where they're never going to meet you, right? Because
that's an important piece.
It's an absolutely critical piece of this. You could have a 50-year-old male who's claiming he's a 75-year-old woman dating. That's the profile he's created, the scammer. So the 75-year-old male who's looking for companionship is going to find this profile of this charming, contemporary with whom he's going to have a relationship.
Right.
But it's not who they say they are. So they're never going to get on a FaceTime call with you, right? They're never going to meet you in person. And any pictures that you might ask for or something like that, like, oh, send me pictures of you and your kids. They're going to find something on the internet, or they're going to find something that's fake to continue to substantiate that they're this person who they're not. So in fact, they're always going to be inaccessible, right? So they're going to be living through service in the military, or, hey, I'm on a work assignment in China for 6 months, or I live in California when I'm here in Springfield, Massachusetts. So they're going to create a scenario in which it's very difficult to access them, very difficult if not impractical, for you to meet them before they can try to extract this money from you.
That's a big red flag.
Huge,
Yeah.
huge. The escalation is going to be pretty rapid, right? They're quickly going to profess affection and love, right? Because they're trying to pull you in. They're trying to get you in this position as quick as possible, efficiency for them, to get you to that point where you're tied in, and then their emergency, right? Their issue is going to get you to give them money. So they're going to move this quickly. You've got to be very mindful of stories, of narratives, right? If there's inconsistencies, you got to be a little bit shrewd. And it's unfortunate if you're looking for a relationship and you're on a dating site, and you might be lonely, and that's okay, but you've got to be a little bit careful about what you're being told. And if someone says something, hey, my son Bobby, I've got one kid, his name's Bobby, then a week later say, oh, my daughter, Veronica. Well, he said, those are the things that got to be red flags, right? I mean, it's unfortunate in these situations that people have to be careful in how they engage, but you do, because this is what scammers do. And if you see things, and if your gut's telling you, hey, this isn't right, or he told me one thing and then there's something contrary he's told me now, these are the red flags that you got to look for, because some of these people will make mistakes. They will have inconsistent stories because it's not the truth, right?
Yeah.
It's not the truth.
Right.
They're also going to have a minimal other online presence. So if you're on a dating site or you're on Facebook, they're not going to have an Instagram account. They're not going to have a YouTube account. They're not going to have other things because, again, this is a fabricated profile. Right. So you got to do a little bit of homework. If you do engage and there are pictures sent back and forth, they're going to send you obviously fake pictures, general photos, ones that were pulled off the internet or were now created by artificial intelligence. Them pictures of them traveling or shopping or dining at luxurious locations. Continues to mention the idea of meeting, but it never really comes to fruition. It's always a far off thing. That's going to be the game. They're going to say, oh, we'll meet next week. Or when that next week comes, they're going to say, oh, gee, work is really crazy. Or, I can't leave my dog, so let's do it next week. It'll always be sort of
those
pushed
are
out.
convincing statements, right?
Right. And also, a big part of our lives today are the technologies that we're fortunate to have. I know even my parents, well into their 80s, will, FaceTime from their iPad or phone with their grandkids. These scammers aren't going to do that. So if you're in what you think is a relationship, a budding relationship, and you say, oh, let's talk on FaceTime, let's talk over the computer, let's do a Zoom, whatever it might be, they're not going to do it. Or when it comes up, you're not going to see their face and say, oh, gee, I'm at the hair salon or something like that.
Right.
I can't be on camera. There's always going to be those excuses, and those have to be red flags for folks.
That's a great one, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have given money and your bank contacts you to express concern about victimization, that's obviously a red flag. There's one piece that I want to throw into this, Harry. There's a bill, actually, that's been put forward by Secretary of State William Galvin, our Secretary of State here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which would create some obligations for banks if folks are over a certain age and they're seeking to withdraw significant amounts of money from their bank accounts. And it would allow banks, without any civil liability, to halt the process, to just pause it and ask some questions of that senior citizen. I think it's a great thing. I think it has a lot of value, and I think it would prevent some of these circumstances where people are losing thousands of dollars to scammers. So that bill is in our legislature now. It's gained some support. It's gonna I hope move forward next year. But that's something to think about. It's something, if you're so inclined, if you're politically engaged, to call up your state representative or state senator here in Westfield or wherever you might live and say, hey, I support Secretary Galvin's bill to protect senior citizens from scammers. So that's a little piece, and banks do have some of those, depending on your bank, of course. They have certain precautions in place already of their own volition. To ask those questions if a senior citizen comes forward and says, I need $10,000 in cash. They might ask you some questions. And if it's for a legitimate purpose, that's okay. It may take you a couple extra seconds, but it's really designed to make sure that senior citizens don't fall prey to these terrible scams and lose money that they're never going to get back.
And I'm guessing that once the money has been accessed, it's gone. There's no way to go after it or to get it back. It's not protected by the bank. It's gone.
It's gone. Yeah, there are no bank protections like, if someone steals your credit card, that's not the case. And quite frankly, our ability, especially as local officials here in Hampden County, with our state police and local police departments, to successfully identify and charge someone and then prosecute them is very low, because very often, as I mentioned before, these folks are out of our jurisdiction, out of our state, out of our country. And for us to identify these people, and again, they're experts. Some of these folks are organized criminal gangs and organizations. They have certain they've anonymized themselves from any sort of police identification, any sort of law enforcement reach. So prevention is critical here, and that's why we want to educate folks to not get themselves in positions to give over this money, because the likelihood is you're not going to get the money back, even if at some point you realize this and police and law enforcement get involved.
So let's talk about family members, friends who suspect something might be going on, because it could be a sibling, it could be a parent, it could be a friend. It really transcends anybody that you have a relationship with, and you know that they've been alone by themselves, they've lost their spouse or whatever the circumstances are, and you hear them starting to talk about, oh, I've met somebody. What are the red flags that we should be thinking about or aware of so that we can help alert ourselves to want to talk to them and say, hey, how have you really researched this? Do you know what you're getting into here?
Yeah, this is really for family and friends of older adults. Be mindful of their relationships and how they're communicating online. Start from a non-judgmental position. I think that's critical.
That's good.
Yeah, I got my parents who are well into their 80s, and they're your parents or they're your grandparents, or they're just your elders. So I don't think anybody responds well to feeling like someone's looking over their shoulder or judging them, or they're sort of suspicious of their abilities to kind of figure these things out. You just gotta approach it from a non-judgmental position, especially with parents and grandparents, right? Because you don't want that adverse reaction. You don't want them to turtle or to shut down.
Right.
You want to communicate with them. But there's certainly red flags. Yeah, like you said, Harry. Hey, I've met this wonderful man. He's out in California, or he's over in London, or something like that. And then you got to start a conversation and say, well, Dad or Mom, tell me a little bit more about this. How'd you meet? And have that dialogue so you can get to the bottom of it and be aware and be helpful, at least, about making sure your mom or your dad or your grandparent is protecting himself or herself, and you can engage with them. But I think they're not going to be forthright again, like we talked about earlier, Harry. This can be embarrassing stuff, right? For someone at any age, where you've essentially gotten duped, seeking a relationship, seeking some companionship, and there's someone trying to steal from you. I mean, that's embarrassing. So you got to be very delicate in the way in which you deal with this with your older family and friends, but you got to be aware, you got to be in communication with them, and you got to be aware of the situations we've talked about here, how this starts, how it happens.
Yeah, no question. So victims who have been taken advantage of, you've kind of alluded to it already. What options do they have for fighting back, for realizing that they've been scammed? And it doesn't sound like they have any recourse on getting money back, but what can they do once they realize that they have been taken advantage of?
Yeah, I hesitate to say that there's no recourse. Certainly if you're suspicious of someone who's scamming you or trying to scam you, or you have been victimized, go immediately to law enforcement, right? Start with your local law enforcement. You can call the Hampden District Attorney's Office, and we got folks who will help you and guide you in the right direction. But, immediately, I think if you've given over money or you've given some personal information like PIN numbers, go to your bank, right? Call your bank, or go and show up at a branch and say, hey, I think I've been scammed. So you can shut off access to your bank accounts.
Right.
And, we all hope prevent any money from going to the wrong people. I think the second order of priority is to speak with law enforcement. And, certainly here in Westfield and Westside, Agawam, all our local police departments are terrific and are committed to protecting their senior citizens in their towns, as are we in the Hampden District Attorney's Office. So you can call us. But that local police department is going to send out a detective, is going to have a conversation, and is going to work this thing back. And they'll summon our assistance with our state police and try to have an investigation that leads to some accountability and leads to an arrest. But those are the steps, and certainly communicate with your family members and your friends, folks at your senior center. Here are great senior centers in Westfield, right? Talk with folks there who can help you prevent any further loss. Look at your social media accounts and make sure you're protected. But really, it's communication, it's openness for our senior citizens who are in these positions or might have been scammed or maybe in the process of being scammed. Talk with folks. If you're suspicious after you see this program, right, and maybe you're engaged in a relationship through a dating site or through social media, speak with people. Be open about it. Speak with your friends. Speak with your kids and say, hey, here's what's going on. I think this person's legitimate, but will you help me? Because I heard Harry Rock talking about these victimizations. I heard our district attorney talking about this. So be open and don't shut down to this. I mean, speak with folks around you, make sure you're in a safe position. The money that you've earned, the money that you've saved for your retirement, your pensions are yours, and you've earned it over a lifetime and over a career. Protect it. Don't fall prey to these scams.
Yeah, no, those are great points. I'm curious, when you were throwing out $240 million, that was national, national romance. I love that word, romance scams.
Yeah.
Is law enforcement, are they mounting a fight against this? Are there things happening nationally that you see that'll eventually trickle down to your level? But what's happening nationally to help with this?
We're pretty affirmative in the work that we do here. We actually were at the Westfield Senior Center in June talking about scams and talking about romance scams. So I think we're ahead of the curve here in Hampden County.
Oh, that's interesting. I love that.
Yeah, and as you know, Harry, for years now, we've been going around to senior centers across Hampden County talking about all kinds of scams, right? Internet-based scams, telephone scams, in-person scams, protecting our senior citizens. That's very important to me. With parents I love very dearly who are senior citizens, and going around and knowing so many folks and seeing so many folks in our community, we want to protect our senior citizens first and foremost. So we've done that preventative work, that education. We're going to continue to do it. We're going to talk about romance scams. But certainly in other jurisdictions, and the federal government is engaged on this. The FBI is very good on these kinds of things. So you can look at their materials. The FBI has addressed this issue. But it proves to folks listening and folks watching, this is a nationwide issue, and it's here in Hampden County. It's in Westfield and Westside and Agawam. So be careful.
Yeah, no, those are great thoughts. And again, tips that we've kind of already covered this, but tips that people should be thinking about.
Yeah.
What should you be aware of when you're out looking for companionship, or you've decided to engage yourself in a dating site? What are the things, red flags again, that you should be looking for just to protect yourself?
Well, first, it's a preventative thing. Don't limit how much information you put out there in this sphere of the internet, right? Through your Facebook accounts, through any social media accounts, be careful what you put out there, knowing that it could be misused. And there's probably more information out there than you think about yourself. So in any discourse you have with an individual, whether it's a phone call or it's a potential romance issue, how many grandkids you have is probably out there somewhere for people to read and see, right? Your phone number, maybe your address, things like that are out there. So if someone says, well, I know you live on 123 Main Street, or I know you have 4 grandkids, so I'm not a scammer. I'm interested in you, or I'm calling. Those things you got to be careful, because that stuff is out there. But limit how much information you put out there. Take the time, be deliberate in getting to know someone with whom you're engaging in this potential relationship, right? Ask questions. Personal things. Where did you grow up? What's your favorite restaurant in your hometown? What's your family like? What's your favorite vacation place? What's your middle name? What school did you graduate from? Right? That's a good one. So someone says, well, gee, I grew up actually right near you. I grew up in Agawam, Massachusetts, but now I'm over in Kuwait, right? Okay, what high school did you go to in Agawam? And they're going to say, I don't know, or they're going to give you something and you can cross-reference that, right?
That's a good
So
one.
these are the things that you've got to do to be deliberate and to be careful. Ask them personal questions. What's a typical day like for you? And again, that confirmation, can we have a video call later? I'm looking forward to seeing you and meeting you face to face, at least electronically. Can we do a video call? Can we do a Zoom call? Ask them for other social media accounts that they might have, right? Because a fake person is not going to have a corresponding Instagram or Twitter account or something like that. So these are the precautions that you can put in place to be careful and be mindful that there's going to be responses, but you got to vet those responses, right? You may say, hey, can I have a picture of you? I only see your profile picture. Would you send me some pictures of you? Would you send me some pictures of you and your grandkids or something like that? You can now, with Google and with all the wonderful technology that we have, you can search an image, right? So if you had an image of me and you searched it, Anthony Gulluni would come up in a Google search and all other pictures of me would come up. But if someone says, hey, I'm Jim Smith, here's my picture, I'm a 75-year-old male, and then you search that picture and it's Tom Johnson, who died 10 years ago, you got a scam on your hands, right? Someone found that picture online and is using it to create this false profile.
So they're looking at other profiles of people who are deceased and just
They'll Google 75-year-old man, they'll find someone who died years ago and say, yeah, this is me now. Because they want to convince the person on the other end that, hey, I'm a 75-year-old male, right?
Wow.
So there are ways to protect yourself. It's a little bit laborious, right? It's going to take a little bit of work,
right?
But you got to engage in it if you're going to have this sort of relationship, if you're going to put yourself out there to make sure that you don't get scammed.
Wow. This is scary stuff. And, it's
again, scary, Harry. That rhymes. I like that. It's scary, Harry. but it's reality, and there are ways to protect yourself, right? The bad scenarios are scary, right? Losing your money, engaging with somebody who's not who they say they are is scary, but you can protect yourself, right? There's hope. There's ways to be careful. There's ways to enjoy these years. There's ways to find love and companionship. There's ways to enjoy social media safely. You just got to be a little bit careful. It's like anything. You get in a car, you got to be careful. You got to look both ways. You got to use your blinkers. You got to drive 35 miles an hour.
Right.
It's okay. You can do it. You just got to be careful, and you got to do certain things. Same thing with the internet. Same thing with these kinds of dating sites and social media applications.
And I think I love your perspective on it, and I think that it is about trust. And what we need to encourage people is, don't give up in looking for trusted relationships and friends and romance opportunities that might be out there, because there are good people. Most of us are good people.
Absolutely. Don't let this deter you
Right.
from finding relationships that make you happy. If you're interested in something romantic, if you're interested in a partner, do it, but just do it safely. I like this analogy of driving a car, right? You don't drive in your car and put a blindfold on and just drive however you want.
Right.
You take certain steps. You take precautions.
Right.
Same thing with using the internet. Same thing if you choose to go on a dating site. There's good stuff there. You can get to the place you want to go. You just got to be a little bit careful about it.
Yeah, so use your common sense and really think about the red flags that are out there. This has been a fascinating conversation. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to share that...
Yeah, folks have heard me say this, Harry, probably on this program and the times that we've been out in the community over the last several years talking about scams. When in doubt, follow your instincts and don't act alone and don't act in haste. We say those two things relative to seniors protecting themselves in general, right? If someone comes to your door and says, hey, I got some extra asphalt in the truck, you want your driveway done? Make a phone call to a friend, call over your spouse, call your kid, call the police department, say, hey, is this legitimate? Like, don't act alone and don't act in haste, right? So don't act alone and don't act quickly. If someone calls and says, hey, I'm your grandson, this is Tommy, I got in an accident, I need, call Tommy's dad or mom, or call Tommy whose number you have in your cell phone. Say, hey, did you just call me? Are you okay? Right? Don't act alone. Don't act in haste, because that's what scammers focus on. They focus and seek to victimize those who are isolated and alone, and they try to get you to do it quickly. because that's when people make bad decisions, right? When they act quickly and they don't consider things and they act on the basis of emotion. So in general, if all else fails, if you're, didn't catch the messages or whatever today, don't act alone. Don't act in haste. Call a friend, call a police officer, call a senior center person that you trust, call a family member before you give over any money or personal information.
These are phenomenal tips. And District Attorney Anthony Gulluni, I want to thank you so much for coming in today to share this sad but very important message, because people are being taken advantage of. And again, if you're looking for companionship, you shouldn't stop, but use common sense, be aware of what the red flags are, and be thinking about what they're asking you to do, and is this something that a true friend or a person that really cares for you would be asking you to do. So just use caution out there, but that's the big thing. I want to say special thanks to Pete Coles, WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15 manager and producer, for his help and support to make this show possible. As a reminder, this show will air every Tuesday and Thursday in September at 2:45. So if you want to watch it again, you can pick it up again any Tuesday or Thursday at 2:45. On behalf of Pete Coles, Mike Squindo, Tina Gorman, I'm Harry Rock, and this has been another edition of the Westfield Council on Aging Presents on WCPC Westfield Cable Channel 15. Be careful out there, everybody. Have a great day. We'll see you on the next show. Thanks so much.